For our next section, I'm going to demonstrate how we're going to do a scan. I'm going to add new patients just for a review. You can type in your patient's last name and then first name. And then you can either put in a date of birth. I normally don't do that. As you can see that whenever you have a red line, that means this step has not been completed yet. So if I go to patient ID and I just put in their patient ID, now you can see it's green and I can go forward if I need to. I also like to put in the doctor's name. So we'll have last name, first name. I skip the date of birth and a patient ID. Once the patient ID is put in, I can now go forward. So we're going to go to Add Case. And this is where we're going to set up everything. You can see that case options, I can do either a smile design or articulation. In this particular case, I'm not going to use either, so I'm going to close it. I'm doing a single restoration. I'm doing a crown, so I have to select that. I'm doing biogeneric individual. Now there's 3 design modes. Biogeneric individual uses adjacent teeth to design the restoration. Biogeneric copy is where we actually copy a pre-existing tooth, and biogeneric reference is when we use a tooth somewhere in the arch to give reference for what we want to design. We're going to concentrate mainly at this point on biogeneric individual. The material is highlighted that I want to use Emacs CAD, so I'm going to click Emacs CAD, and it also defaults to my milling device. So by picking the material first and also only having one milling device, I just have to choose the restoration type and the design mode. Now I'm going to tell it we're doing tooth number 30, and here again is case details, and as you can see we're doing a crown, Ivoclar Viadent, Emacs CAD, and this is the milling chamber. If I want to edit this, I can click Edit, and then if I wanted to change materials, let's say I wanted to use Ivoclar and decided that I would use the TelioCAD. So I'm going to pick TelioCAD, which is their temporary material, and then I'd still have my device. When I click the Apply button, that now changes what we're using. So I'm going to, if I decided I wasn't even going to do that tooth, I could do Delete, and it deletes everything on the tooth. So I can go back and I'm going to say, here I've got material, Emacs CAD. I'm going to choose tooth number 30, and now you can see it's all back where it was, Ivoclar Viadent and Emacs CAD. On the side, this is case options, and that again is if I wanted to add smile design or articulation. Now these can be moved around. Notice how I can left click, hold, and move these. And whatever I have open, the next time this screen opens, this will be in that same position. Well, I'm not going to use the articulation or anything that much, so I'm going to minimize it. This is how we turn the case details on and off. And if we have other indications, and in this case we're not doing a bridge and we're not linking because we're only doing one tooth, so this will not highlight. We're now going to go to the acquisition phase. So we're going to go next. And again, if you look across the top, this is called the phase bar. And in the phase bar we have administration, acquisition, model, design, and mill. Now I said a little bit earlier, this is also the quick help button. So if I left click on quick help, it's going to tell us how to do the scans. And you can see all these dots, which means they're all these different hints that you can do. And it explains the way to take the scans, and if you are finished with this and you don't want to see the help again, you can just close it. Also, if I click on Tools, Now, the tools that are available are just basically cut, and that's will take place once we do the scans. And then if I wanted to add a catalog, if we were going to do a reference or a copy, this is where I'd add the catalog. Because we're not going to use those, I'm going to close that for now. Now, this is the step bar, and you can see that on the step bar I have a red line, which means this has not been completed yet. So the scan has not been completed. Because I said I was doing a lower, you can see here's the lower jaw and it's blinking, which means that's the one that it wants taken. So I'm going to left click on the lower jaw just to make sure. Then we're going to place it, and you can see I'm out of focus, so it's not taking pictures yet. I normally like to start in the back and then drop the camera until it starts taking pictures. As you can see, I usually take the occlusal first, and then roll and take the buccal. Then I'm going to roll and take the lingual. Now when you get out of focus, or if you go too fast, hear how the sound changes? That just means it can't match where you are. So if you go back to a recognized area, you can see it'll now take pictures again. You can also see that I have the hints turned on, so that's that yellow screen. And what it's telling me is I probably don't have enough picture of the restoration. Now, as you can see, if I turn this, we have a hole interproximally. I have to fill that. I have a hole interproximally in the back, and I also have a hole here in the distal. And that's what these little hints are trying to tell me. The scatter, well, there's a couple of reasons for this. I have a bright light next to me, and that light is causing a little bit of interference, so I need to shut that off. And the other thing, this is just scatter, and it will be thrown away. It won't be there. So what you'll do is, after you've looked at this, I center click and blow it up so I can evaluate if I have everything. Then I'm going to go back over and turn the camera back on, and then go back to the mouth, find a location, and then I'm going to tilt the camera where I can see and try to fill in the interproximal. And when you're doing this, you can either watch the screen, or you can watch in the mouth and see where you are and just listen for the music. And if you see, I can roll this up. Again, this is all scatter, so I'm going to throw that away. I still have a slight hole, and the mesial and distal of the adjacent teeth are the hardest things to get. Sometimes the easiest way to fill those in is if you can get your camera in almost like putting it in from the buccal to the lingual and then rolling it. See if I can do that. It will help fill those areas in. So I'm going to start, and then I'm going to turn my camera, and then I'm going to roll to the mesial and to the distal, and I'm just trying to fill in those areas that were not filled in before. One of the other things that you must always remember is make sure you end somewhere on the occlusal surface. You want the model to be vertical. And again, you can see that it's saying that, well, it's suggestion I fill in. It's suggesting I fill this area in. I really am not concerned about that. I want to make sure that I have interproximals and my margins. So that all looks good. And I also want to show you what happens when you catch a finger. So as you can see in this picture, I've caught part of my finger. But because it's actually not attached to anything, and by attached, you can see that it's really not touching the model, that will be thrown away. Now evaluate everything to make sure you've filled all the margins in. And this is critical because I'm missing a little bit of a margin here. You can see where it's black. And if I rotate this slightly, I can see it's now blue. So I'm going to say that, okay, I have to remember, I have to go back and get the distal of my preparation. So I'll turn the camera on. And then I'm going to run the camera down and attempt to fill that in. I'm going to end on the occlusal again. And this time I should have everything filled. So again, I'm going to blow this up. And by blowing it up, remember it's center click and hold and roll the ball. Now I can see I've filled in all the contacts and I've filled in my margins. So now I'm going to do the upper jaw. I'll turn the camera back on. When you hear that noise, it just means it can't register. So go back to a spot that has common areas. And then I'm going to end on the occlusal again. Now this, because it's the opposing arch, I'm not going to be terribly concerned about filling everything in. I just want to make sure that I have the occlusion very well. Then we're going to do the buccal bite. And in order to do the buccal bite, and I just want to point out also, if you look right here where it says scan, notice it still has red, which means I can't go forward. This is the next arrows. I can't go forward because I have not completed this step. So now it says I have to scan, and I have to scan the buccal. So I'm going to left click, place the camera, and now it's very important that you tell your patients to make sure they stay biting. So I always tell my patient, please stay biting, don't open, please stay biting, don't open. And then when you take this picture, don't go any farther than what you did on the upper and lower arches, which means I went to the cuspid, and as you can see, I'm slightly short of the cuspid right now. So this is an important part. Make sure that they stay biting, and then now I have this green. And because of that, I'm going to be able to go forward, and then this will now make the model. So I'm going to go forward, and you're going to see that it will start to stitch everything together. And remember, the lower arch had my finger in it. You're going to see it throws it away, and then it'll do the upper and then the bite. Now what it's doing is it's going through all the pictures that this takes. It takes about 60 pictures a second. So it has to go through all of those. Any of the ones that have scatter, it's going to discard, and it's choosing all the high quality pictures and going to make the model. So this does take a minute or two. Once the upper model is finished, it goes through the same process with the lower model. As you can see, it's going to go through and throw away any of the pictures it does not need. And then once this is completed, it will go forward and develop the same thing for the buccal bite. Okay, this is the buccal bite. As you can see, it's just thinking and putting all the pictures together. Once this completes, it's now going to go to the stage where it puts the upper jaw, the lower jaw, and the buccal bite all together. And then it's going to automatically stitch them together. So you don't have to do this yourself manually. It'll stitch them together by itself. And then here it is. And you can see that it opened and it now shows all the bites. You can see where all the occlusion is. This is extremely important that you check this. To do this, I'm going to close the tools because I've had this open before. When you get to this stage, it's very important that you go to Tools and then also that you go to Analyzing Tools. So if I wanted to reset the buccal bite, I could re-click here and I could set it manually if I had to. So I'll hit Reset. And in order to set it manually, all it is I left click and hold, but whichever side of the occlusal plane I grab, so I'm going to grab above the occlusal plane, I have to take that to the upper arch. If I grab below the occlusal plane, I have to take that to the lower arch. Once this is stitched together, I can then, you can see how it's stitched and it opened with model contacts. If I shut model contacts off, see how it closes back up? Now, whoever used this the last time, if you leave model contacts on, the model contacts will stay open. But if you close it, it will close in this area. This is a very, very important step. You don't want to miss this step. You want to check, because if I click model contacts, it's going to show me my patient's occlusion, and I'm actually going to check this against pieces of articulating paper in my patient's mouth to make sure they didn't open as we were taking the buccal scan. If this is not the exact same as the buccal scan, then what I would do is I would discard this, go back to acquisition, which I can go back here. It says the models have already been done, so I'm going to hit OK. And then my pictures will be locked, so you can see it has an unlock and a lock button. If I click unlock, I can then take the buccal pictures and throw them away. And if I do that, I would tell my patients to close back together again and then rescan the buccal bite. So if I wanted to throw them away, I can hit yes, go back to my patient, tell my patient once again to close and stay biting, and then just rescan and make sure that the patient stays closed as you're scanning. Once you're completed, shut your camera off and then hit the next arrows, which are the double chevrons. And this will now go back to the buccal bite. And we're going to do the same thing. Now you're going to see all it's doing is going through and making the buccal model. The other two models have been completed, and then it should automatically put them together again. So it's thinking, and you can see that cursor is spinning. And once that is completed, it will string the upper, lower, and buccal bite together. And then because I have the model contacts on, see here, because I have that turned on, I can check and make sure that the bite is the same. Color model, if I turn that on, it just takes the model color off. And model box, what that does is if I turn off the model contacts so you can see it a little bit better, this is the model box. If I left click on model box, I can now turn this, and this is like looking at an impression. If I click model box, that is just like looking at a poured up model. So that's the purpose of model box and then model context. Both of these very, very important, especially the model context. Do not miss that step.